Hello, I'm Lindy Johnson, Senior Editor of FastCompany.com. Welcome to the FastCompany.com podcast, Behind the Covers. Today, I'm here with Jeff Chu, Senior Editor of Fast Company Magazine. We're going to talk about Fast Cities 2008 today and hear from the magazine. The great urban theorist Jane Jacobs wrote about cities of exuberant diversity. And in our 2008 Cities of the Year, Chicago and London, we have two stellar examples. They and our 12 cities to watch are no utopias. We're still looking. But amid economic uncertainty, they're vibrant, creative, and growing. These hotspots, these fast cities, are full of life and bursting with diversity in race, in culture, and in business. Join us for a tour. So, this is our audio tour where we go behind the scenes and learn more about fast cities and how it was all put together. Jeff, can you please tell us exactly what makes a city fast?
You know, it's kind of a loose term. Fast means creative and vibrant and economically dynamic. But there are really some things that you can't quantify. It's virtues of a city that make it a place that people want to be. But it goes beyond its own borders. A fast city is also a place that has influence in the broader world, that has reach in terms of its citizens and what they're doing.
That sounds really interesting. And I know as some people are going to wonder when they see the issue, the magazine, and they see that Chicago made it to City of the Year. It's the U.S. City of the Year, in fact. Okay, you talk about the virtues of the city. Exactly what is it about Chicago that makes Chicago fast? Why would Chicago be faster than, say, San Francisco or New York, where tech world is booming, media world is booming?
It's a confluence of different factors. I think right now the national economy is in a state of flux. And when we were looking at the statistics, we noticed that Chicago was doing much better than New York and LA. So that was one thing in the city's favor. Another thing in the city's favor was its population growth. In the latest census estimates, Chicago was the only city outside of the Sun Belt that was in the top 10. All of the other ones were Atlanta, Dallas, Houston, those kinds of cities. It was unusual for a city in the Midwest to be attracting thousands of people at this time.
So you're saying that people are migrating to Chicago, actually, from other cities?
The population of Chicago is growing right now, and that was surprising to us. You can also see the impact, unexpected to a lot of people, of Chicago on the cultural scene. Kanye West, Lupe Fiasco, Jeremy Piven, these are all people from Chicago, and they're all having a significant moment in their careers. So if you look behind the scenes, you can see a lot of unexpected impact that Chicago's having.
How about their football team?
Well, maybe not in the sporting scene. Fortunately, that wasn't one of the cultural markers that we were looking for.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what's Chicago? I noticed in the magazine you guys have selected a cadre of creative class and influentials to speak about Chicago and why they love the city or what makes the city work. You have people there such as Greg Brown, the CEO of Motorola, and Dee Roscioli. Is that how you pronounce her name?
Roscioli,
okay. That sounds Italian. Star of Chicago's Wicked. How did you decide these were the people to go to find out more about Chicago and why they loved the city?
Well, reporters always know that a story is partly defined by who you get to talk to you. So partly it was a matter of who was willing to talk to us.
Right.
But we also wanted to show the readers a diversity of voices, to say, these are the people that are creating in Chicago right now. These are the people who are using it as their home base to reach out to their broader audiences. So that's why we picked artists and writers and chefs and tech executives, all people from all different walks of life, to say why they love this city and why they make their home there.
Right. So you talk about how diverse this panel of creatives that you spoke to was. That also shows how diverse Chicago is itself. And I mean, you did speak about some of the factors and why you guys chose it. Would you say that Chicago is as good for business as it is for the arts right now?
Chicago has been ranked the top city for business expansion and investment by certain experts for several years in a row now. And I think that's partly because of the lower cost of living that you have in Chicago compared with New York. And it's partly because it's a little bit under the radar. So you don't have the same pressures that you would in New York. A lot of people talk about the difficulty of maintaining the image that you need to work in LA, and then the difficulty of maintaining the ego that you need to work in New York.
Right.
So some of our sources said that Chicago kind of hits that sweet spot for them in terms of big city dynamics but small town feel.
All right. Did you guys at all uncover how the housing market is in Chicago while you did this story?
The housing market in Chicago is okay. It's not fantastic. Illinois, especially in the suburban parts, has suffered a lot. But we didn't find that to be a significant factor in excluding it from consideration. It wasn't high on the list just because of how dynamic it was in other areas.
Right. I wonder, too, if, Obama running for president has any impact on any of what's happening in the city.
Well, it certainly puts the spotlight more in Chicago. You know, having the first viable black presidential candidate is a significant thing. And he's done some really creative things on his campaign, too, from his web strategy to his outreach. So that certainly affected our decision-making, I think.
Okay. Now, on to your global city of the year. You guys chose London. And lately I've been hearing a lot about countries cities in the Mideast, such as Dubai and so on. And not much about Europe lately. Why London?
If you look at London and if you consider the diversity of the population there, as well as the cultural influence that it has on our daily lives, from the brands we buy to the music we listen to, it has a lot more influence than someplace like Dubai. I spent about a week in Dubai in March, and I found it to be sort of a cultural wasteland. It gets a lot of hype, and there's a lot of money, but it doesn't go a lot deeper than that. Maybe in 10 years, maybe in 20 years, the same types of creatives, the fashion designers, the artists, the graphic designers, the web technicians and programmers that are flocking to London now will be flocking to the Middle East. We'll have to wait and see. But right now, despite the high cost of living and despite maybe kind of a fusty old school image,
right.
London really is a hotspot.
Right. I mean, I do know that for creatives, as far as music artists, many of them use YouTube to help them boost their career over here, such as you had like Lily Allen and I think maybe even Duffy. So I definitely see that young, youthful kind of creative thing happening. Was that some of the stuff you guys looked at as well?
Sure, and I think one reason that artists are having an easier time coming from London and why London is a good base for a lot of people, including people from across Europe who have moved there, is because English is the language of trade.
Right.
So our writer actually told me one day, Londoners are better at speaking American than anyone else. And when you think of it that way, it makes sense. You know, all these people flock to London, and from there, they can translate their culture to the rest of the world.
Okay. Well, let's speak about the writers a bit. Were the writers you selected to write these pieces from the cities that they wrote about?
Both of our writers are from those cities. Alice Rawsthorne is the director of the Design Museum in London. She's a prominent design critic there. And Alex Kotlowitz is an award-winning journalist who's based in Chicago and has been living there for almost 30 years. Both of them have had stellar careers and have had a lot of experience exploring different aspects of their hometowns, and that's one reason we chose them, in addition to the fact that they're just great writers.
Okay, all right. That's definitely something I'm sure readers would like to know. Also, beyond your U.S. city and your global city, you also had these 12 growth points, these up-and-comers, so to speak. What's with these growth points? There's a list there, and a list that is kind of interesting, such as Kansas City is on that list. Can you explain how that whole list came into being?
We wanted to highlight 12 other cities that are worth watching right now. They are not the leaders in their categories by any measure. They are not clamoring to be number one. But during 2008 and beyond, these are cities that are going to be influential. So we chose Beijing because of the Olympics and the incredible investment that the Chinese government has been putting into remaking that city architecturally and culturally. We chose more surprising cities, like, as you said, Kansas City. Most people are not that familiar with animal biosciences and the immense amount of research and development that goes into the industries that produce food and leather for us. But Kansas City is the hub for that kind of bioscience, as well as a site of some really interesting urban development and redevelopment right now. They have some really interesting architectural projects and urban renewal efforts going on there. Orlando is another one that I think people might not expect, because you think suburbia and Disney World.
Right.
We cited it for its booming status as a medical town. There's a new medical center there. There are researchers who are moving to Orlando because the local government has put a lot of effort into building that up as a center of biotech research. So these are places to watch. We're taking a wait-and-see attitude, but we are excited about their prospects.
Okay. How long was that list before you guys narrowed it down to 12?
It was a few dozen long.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think each city has its loyalists, and there were people who were arguing for different cities, like, oh, I love Portland, or I really like Berlin. And when it comes down to it, it's an interesting thing to debate and to argue, because what does hot really mean, and what does fast really mean? You can debate this endlessly, and we'd love to hear from readers about what their favorite fast cities would be and what they would nominate, so that we can take that into account next year.
Okay. Well, Jeff, I thank you for joining us today to talk about Fast Cities 2008. And readers, thank you for checking in and listening.